So thank you, Rosemary Hill and the Lionsgate Hospital Foundation for the opportunity to come speak with you today. I want to start off by giving you a brief introduction of who I am and what I came here to share with you. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 14, and I've been through pretty much the entire spectrum of treatments and severity with this condition. There wasn't a day that went by while I was growing up where I wasn't reminded of the harsh realities of living with IBD. In 2011, the medication that I had been taking stopped working, and after exhausting all the treatment options available to me, I ended up having a total colectomy in May of 2012. As many of you know and can relate, this new plumbing system was a big adjustment, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. But now that it's been a few years, I can really appreciate the amazing growth opportunities and newfound awarenesses that I've been offered. And I feel as though I've been given a second chance to participate in this incredible life, and I'm really excited to share what I've learned with you. So in addition to being a certified life coach and founder of Inside Wellness, IBD Empowerment, and the Intentional Day Planner, I'm also a volunteer for the Vancouver chapter of the United Ostomy Association, which Joy's here in the back, as their visitor program coordinator and younger adult program coordinator. And I also sit on the advisory board for the Ostomy Canada Society, and I've written in the past for their Ask the Ostomy Lifestyle Expert column. So I'm passionate about empowering people so they can step into the happiest and healthiest versions of themselves. I want to help people who are ready to remember their magnificence and move through their grief and reclaim their joy. As a life coach, I'm fierce about holding a sacred space for love and possibilities for you when your light has been dimmed by grief or illness. I know what it's like to feel lost and alone in the darkness, not knowing which way to turn. And having someone like a coach or a counselor to hold the light during those times will allow you to find your way again, and just so you can clearly and confidently move forward in the direction of your dreams. Today we're going to look at body image and intimacy concerns for someone with an ostomy. We'll do this by touching on some of my own experiences as an ostomate and through my work as a life coach. I'm also going to share some of my experiences as a young woman growing up with Crohn's disease, because if we're going to explore body image, we need to look into our past. How did we see ourselves before surgery, and what did we tell ourselves about our bodies back then? And every single person in this room has their own unique journey, and therefore many of you will undoubtedly have different reasons for having an ostomy. Some of you may be able to relate to some of my experiences living for many years with an ongoing bowel condition. For others, it may have come as a surprise when the biopsy from your colonoscopy came back abnormal, or if you have an urostomy, when that came back abnormal. And maybe you were relatively symptom-free up until that point. But I'm sure every single person can remember that fateful conversation when they heard the word ostomy come out of their physician's mouth, and you began imagining what your life would be like with a bag attached to your belly. So when you hear the word body image, what does that mean to you? The definition I found from Webster's is that it's a subjective picture or mental image of one's physical appearance established by both self-observation and by noting the reactions of others. So even though it's believed that both of these factors play a role in shaping body image, I'll be focusing on the first one, the self-observation piece, since that is really the only one we have any control over anyway. I also don't believe that these two factors carry equal weight in determining our body image. How we see ourselves is much more important, since that voice inside our head is with us all the time, and it pretty much never stops its commentary. I also believe how we see ourselves and what we project into the world will actually impact how others react to and see us. It's been said that we don't see things as they are, but as we are, which is great news, because if we don't like what we're seeing out there, then we do have the power to change it by looking at what's going on in here. Some people may believe that their body image has only been affected by having surgery, but I believe it goes much deeper than that. You don't have to have an ostomy pouch on the outside of your body to consider what it is that you've been telling yourself about your physical appearance throughout your life. It's also helpful to think about what others may have said to you about your body growing up and whether you've adopted their beliefs and made them your own. So let's start there. So a common experience for many people with Crohn's or colitis is the inability to gain or maintain body weight, especially during a flare-up. However, this was my experience all the time. I can recall many times during my life when people would pass judgment about why I was so thin. I would often feel anger and resentment as well. I've been asked if I'm anorexic or bulimic, and I've even had strangers tell me I need to eat more. Eventually, these inquiries did start to erode my self-trust, and I would even start to question and doubt myself. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough to gain weight. I know it isn't rational, but on some level, I would often feel that having Crohn's disease was my fault. I remember my early teenage years being especially difficult because of the lack of nutrients that I was absorbing did lead to my growth and development being quite delayed. I felt like I didn't fit in with my peers, and it was as though I had some shameful secret. I was only 11 years old when my perineum started to split and I began getting fissures. I was in constant pain and discomfort, and I was going to the bathroom all the time. I was ashamed and embarrassed by what was happening in my body, but I didn't know how to talk about it, and I really felt alone in my suffering. A regimen of suppositories, panty liners, and medication became my norm in high school and throughout my 20s. And as a young woman, the disproportionate time I spent on the toilet and the horrendous smells that did come out of me did negatively influence the mental picture I had of myself. I had a love-hate relationship with my body. Actually, it was more of a shallow, disengaged relationship. I felt at times as though I was at war with myself, and I spent a lot of time in my head worrying and overthinking things because it felt scary and unsafe being in my body. And there was definitely a disconnect between my head, my heart, and my gut. I never felt integrated and whole, just these segmented parts that needed fixing. I always knew that surgery was a possibility, no matter how hard I tried not to look at it or acknowledge it. And the journey towards surgery was a tough one, but it's interesting looking back now and seeing how it all lines up and somehow makes sense. Kind of reminds me of a line from the Rolling Stones song, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try, you might get what you need." I felt like I was making one of the biggest decisions of my life, deciding whether or not to have surgery. It felt empowering to feel as though I was choosing, even though I had pretty much run out of options at 85 pounds and with no more medication to try. With Crohn's and colitis, as many of you guys know, everything so often feels beyond your control. It brings you to your knees in many ways. Sometimes it's being doubled over in pain, and other times it's just surrendering to the mercy of what's unfolding before you. It wasn't until my colon was literally cut out of me that I could finally feel and acknowledge the undigested emotions that I had been carrying around inside me. I had one of the biggest emotional releases of my life as I awoke from the anesthetic, and the realization of what had taken place hit me. It hit me like a tidal wave. All the undigested emotions that I had stuffed down now felt like they were just like drowning me. I sobbed uncontrollably for hours. They didn't let me out of the recovery room for I think about 4 hours. And after multiple shots of pain medication, I eventually realized that the pain was actually in my heart, not my abdomen, and it was emotional, not physical. So despite all the grief that was coming up to be processed that day, something miraculous was offered to me. For maybe the first time ever, I was finally able to observe this intense sadness and really feel it without judging it or getting wrapped up in the drama of it. I was able to just be in total despair and at the same time full of self-love and compassion. It was almost as though my soul's true essence, or my higher self, was able to hold space and reflect unconditional love toward the sobbing girl in the recovery room at St. Paul's Hospital. I wouldn't describe it as an out-of-body experience, but it was definitely a pivotal transition point for me in my journey, and it has shifted how I relate to myself about 180 degrees. So I knew I had the keys to transformation in my hands as I let go, not just of the physical aspects of my body, but the fear of feeling and digesting what was difficult in my life. I'm grateful that I didn't have family or friends around trying to console me, so I could have the emotional release that I needed to have. I decided to forgive myself for being sick and having surgery, and to see myself as completely innocent and lovable from that point forward. It became crystal clear to me, beyond any shred of a doubt, that every single one of us is responsible for loving ourselves. No one else can do it for us, and this is the journey we must each take alone as we go within and find our way home. I now know that true healing and the ability to find peace in the process is an inside job and a lifetime journey. As I began to recover, I knew I would have to get used to the challenges of having a pouch attached to my belly, but it didn't seem as daunting now that I was able to practice loving and accepting myself. I knew it was an incredible gift that I was being offered this newfound awareness and approach to life. I could see how unkind I had been to myself in the past. I vowed I would no longer hold on to my anger, and I would no longer turn against myself again. It felt like the war in my body was over, and I wanted to choose peace instead. Now that I wasn't worried about having an accident at any moment, I could feel the anxiety and the clenching also start to subside from my body. Another pivotal realization was that our minds are like question and answer machines. Therefore, if you ask yourself empowering questions, such as, how can I courageously show up in my life with an ostomy, then your mind has no choice but to answer. It's really that simple. However, keep in mind, it also works the other way. So if you ask yourself, why is my life so difficult now with an ostomy, you'll be shown that as well. During my own inner exploration of body image post-surgery, I began to ask myself, where and how do I feel attractive? How can I show up more that way in my life? And really, what is my definition of beauty? Here's what I uncovered. I find it beautiful being true to who you are. I find it beautiful courageously sharing what's in your heart. I find it beautiful to discover your incredible strength by being vulnerable. I find it beautiful to recognize that you're a survivor, full of grace and more resilient than you ever thought possible. Needless to say, my definition of beauty has evolved beyond what the media and our Western society's limited version was able to offer me. It had to if I was to embrace this new external plumbing system. So now getting back to the self-observation piece in the body image equation, I started to realize that my body image really had very little to do with the ostomy pouch attached to my belly. Instead, it was related to how loving and kind I was, more specifically what that voice inside my head was saying. I knew if I was to love and accept myself, then I would have to choose an empowering story. I wanted to look past the surface of things so I could uncover the truth and the depth in what I was seeing. I knew I could hide my ostomy from others, but I couldn't hide it from myself. So a question we can each ask ourselves is, do we like what we're hearing in our heads and therefore what we're seeing in the mirror? If not, then it's time to change the internal dialogue and rewrite the script. Here's how my next chapter was written. I quickly became accustomed to the basics of having an ileostomy after surgery and the new routines. Being able to live my life without being chained to the toilet was amazing. I felt my confidence and strength begin to return, and that year after surgery, I went backpacking in South America for 3 months, and then to Asia. Literally 1 year after I couldn't get out of a hospital bed, I was trekking along the Great Wall of China with uphill. As I crossed the Chinese countryside with the mist rolling in, I felt like I was in Lord of the Rings or some other similar epic adventure movie. I remember pinching myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Words can't even describe the incredible joy and pride that I felt, just acknowledging how far I had come. I feel that it's really important for every single person who has an ostomy to take the time to recognize their own strength and resilience, even if not out loud, at least to themselves. And I've been talking a lot about all the positive realizations I had after surgery, but I'm not going to lie, it was a roller coaster ride at times and a big jumble of paradoxes. I had a lot of grief to move through as well. My first summer post-surgery, there were times when I felt really sad, like a piece of my freedom had been taken away, even though I had gained so much. I missed spontaneous skinny dipping moments or even just wearing a bikini. I am now challenging the fears that tell me I can't do those things. It takes practice, but I'm willing to continue to work on it one day at a time. One way I'm doing this is if I catch my inner critic voice saying something disempowering, I ask myself, is this true? And the answer is always no. So then I'll follow up with 3 reasons why it's not the truth. So for example, my inner critic voice may say something like, people won't accept you with an ostomy. And I ask myself, is this true? No, because number 1, I am standing in front of all of you sharing and you're still sitting here. Number 2, I haven't lost any friends from having surgery. In fact, I've gained many more. And number 3, I met a wonderful partner post-surgery that loves me and doesn't think twice about having an ostomy, about my ostomies. So speaking of relationships, I was in a 5-year one that came to an end less than a year after surgery. I noticed old victim-like thought patterns trying to creep in and take over. In the past, I would have blamed the breakup on the fact that I had had surgery, and then felt sorry for myself. However, this time I just accepted it and did my best not to take it personally. I was super grateful for all the support he had provided while I was sick and recovering. As I re-entered the dating world, I practiced being unattached to any outcomes, and I was really quite happy just to work on myself without worrying about having a partner in my life. As I was learning and practicing to wholeheartedly love and accept myself, I was mostly just curious to see how others would receive me and my ileostomy. It soon became apparent that it didn't matter who I was sharing my story with. Everyone was actually looking to me to set the tone for how they should feel about the bag on my belly. The more comfortable I became with it, the more that seemed to translate into others being okay with it. Because I know it's all about choice, I began to ask myself, how am I consciously choosing to perceive my ostomy? Was I choosing to see this as something that saved my life or an unfortunate burden I had to bear? I decided to see it as a courageous testament of my will to live and the ticket to my newfound freedom. Whatever I chose would be more than likely how other people would come to see it. I began actually feeling empowered when I was explaining it to people for the first time, even people I was dating and wanting to be intimate with. I knew not everyone would be okay or would be comfortable with it, but that was okay. The people who had the ability to see me beyond the bag on my belly were the people I wanted in my life. In the dating world, it was actually a really great way to quickly filter who was worth getting to know and who was not. Life is short and precious, and I wanted to be selective with whom I was sharing my time. In the past, I stayed in relationships that were comfortable because this person knew my situation with Crohn's. The deeper intimacy piece was always missing because we would never talk about our feelings, our fears, or concerns. Eventually, there would be an obvious disconnect between us. I now understand that it was actually my own issue. I couldn't be honest and intimate with myself, so how could I expect a partner to show up that way? I can't overemphasize the importance of communicating, really listening and hearing one another. This is how we cultivate connection, which make the intimate moments that much better. So now that you've heard a bit about my personal story, I want to share some strategies for managing intimacy and ostomy. Managing intimacy with an ostomy with some level of ease and grace. So I want to start by emphasizing that every single person, whether they have an ostomy or not, would benefit from giving some thought and exploring what it is that they need to feel safe, comfortable, and connected in the bedroom. For some people, this can be quite challenging, especially if they are a people-pleaser personality type. They may have never given themselves permission to discover what their needs are. Once someone has clarity about what their needs are, they can practice communicating them in a way that feels safe, natural, and comfortable. Intimacy does involve sharing honestly, which means also being vulnerable. It can feel scary at times, so a little laughter and lightheartedness can help ease the pressure. Just make sure you aren't using humor as a way to avoid your real feelings. When it comes to logistics, it's important for your partner to understand they're not going to hurt you, and your ostomy is just part of your body. For most people, regular sexual activity is fine once they've healed from surgery, and smaller, more discreet pouches are a great option for intimate moments, and there are also belts and lingerie to cover it if that feels right for you. So here's a slide with some links for intimate wear and swimwear for ostomy. You recognize Joey's at the back, Brandy. When I first had surgery, I thought it was really important to cover the pouch during intimate moments until I spoke with a girl in her 20s who had lived with an ostomy for her whole life. I asked her if she wore anything during her intimate moments and what she recommended, and she quickly responded with, "No way, I want to enjoy sex and not worry about covering myself with some kind of belt." At first, I was a bit taken aback by her abrupt response, and then I thought to myself, wow, how bold and courageous. I want to get to that place. So I began to question whether I was choosing to cover up for my partner or for myself. I also asked myself other questions, such as, could I be comfortable while I was completely naked, and would he be okay with it? Instead of wondering, I decided to just ask. It felt really good to have a candid conversation on this topic, so I knew his thoughts rather than guessing and creating scenarios in my head. It's really about finding out what your needs are as an individual and within your partnership. Together, we decided that if I was wearing a smaller, more discreet pouch, it wasn't really necessary to cover it. Once again, if I was loving and accepting my body as well as communicating my needs, I was giving my partner permission to do the same. So as I wrap my presentation here, please remember that there is no shortage of additional support out there. There's peer mentoring, counseling, life coaching, and consulting, which is what I do. There are many resources for ostomates and their families, either online or in person. And if anyone has any questions related to life coaching and getting additional support, I'm happy to answer them after. Also, if you're interested, I put these forms on the tables. If you fill them out, we're gonna have this little glass thing at the table as you exit, and just fill in your details, and what you can win is a 1-hour life coaching session with me, which is a $120 value. I'm going to be doing a draw for a couple of these. I'll probably do it after, so I have time to put probably like within the next week, and yeah, I'll let you know. And if you don't get picked and you still are interested in speaking with me, I also do initial consultations, and I'm happy to speak with anyone who wants more information. And to learn to thrive and not just survive with an ostomy does require challenging our fears and perceptions so we can come to accept this new physical reality. It's a learning process that takes willingness and ongoing practice. And don't worry if you're not there yet, it doesn't happen overnight. So as I close today, I want to leave you with a quote by Joseph Campbell that has become a favorite one of mine. You must give up the life you planned in order to have the life that is waiting for you. There's an amazing life waiting for every single one of you if you're willing to go for it, ostomy or not. Thank you.